After the restoration of independence, the public debt recovery system was operating in Lithuania. Over 300 court officers were employed by the system, and the rate of recovery of debts for the creditors was approximately 7%. Each judicial officer closed over 600 cases annually, whereas the public judicial officer system cost taxpayers almost €3 million each year. Two-thirds, i.e. 18 member states of European Union, have a private judicial officer system. Currently, only 10 member states have a public judicial officer system. With due consideration to the best practices in other countries and to ensure efficiency, the judicial officer system has undergone reform in Lithuania. Since 2003, sworn judicial officers have been engaged in private practice. What has changed? Debt recovery improved 5 times, even though the number of practicing judicial officers is almost 3 times smaller. Judicial officers close 3 times more cases annually, whereas the entire system does not cost taxpayers anything. Judicial officers recover approximately €100 million in debts annually. More than half of all debt recovery requests come from public authorities. Debts of private natural persons and legal entities account for 40% of all recoveries, whereas 4% consist of requests to recover alimonies. Major progress in the field has been achieved not only by handing forced recovery of debt over to the private sector, but also as a result of introducing the requirement for judicial officers to meet especially high professional competence standards and to have higher education in law. In addition, judicial officers continuously improve their capacities by undergoing different training. The Organization of Professional Self-Governance, viz. The Chamber of Judicial Officers of Lithuania, organizes the aforementioned and other training, as well as helping judicial officers overcome the different challenges of our time. Judicial officers have initiated the transfer of the majority of work-related processes to virtual space. In 2003, the first e-auction portal was developed in the Baltic states. A transparent auction attracts more participants, and assets are being sold for a higher price. The majority of all procedures performed by judicial officers was also transferred to virtual space. An instrument for enforcement is drawn up, served and surrendered electronically. Parties to the proceedings can follow the process of the enforcement of the judgment, submit applications, or initiate procedural acts electronically. Judicial officers engaged in private practice use an efficient data management tool, viz. Judicial Officers Information System, which allows smoother and faster performance. All instruments for enforcement are generated and stored in this electronic system. The system helps judicial officers efficiently obtain data from 25 official registers. It is also integrated with information systems of banks, tax administration, and the State Social Insurance Fund Board, as well as with the Restriction of Debtors' Monetary Funds information system, which efficiently debits the debtors' accounts and distributes the funds among the creditors. A judicial officer can make an inquiry in the database of the State Social Insurance Fund Board through the Judicial Officers Information System and establish a person's insured income. It is evident whether such person receives a pension or any other payments to which the recovery can be directed. As regards the database of the Real Property Register, a judicial officer can find information about real property owned by a person. The Register of Suspected or Convicted Persons can provide information to a judicial officer of whether a person is in prison. Information about a motor vehicle owned by a person can be found in the Register of Road Motor Vehicles. The Register of Firearms contain data of whether a firearm has been issued to a person and whether that person has it. Also data of where such firearm is being kept. The Register of Legal Entities enables us to access data on legal entities, their stakeholders, directors, and changes thereof, as well as financial documents and their submission to the Centre of Registers. Also, to access profit and loss statement, balance sheet, and notes. Thus, it enables us to get an impression of what the company is and what report it submits to the public authority. Information system of social support for families allows a judicial officer to verify data whether a person has been allocated social support that cannot be subject to recovery. 70% of judicial officers' activities are the enforcement of court judgment and decision of other public authorities, whereas 30% consist of legal services provided at the customer request. The situation in the majority of European countries is the reverse, i.e., forced recovery makes up only 30% of judicial officers' activities, whereas the remaining time is spent by providing various legal services. We introduce legal services offered by judicial officers in order to encourage you to use them, in addition to the service of forced debt recovery. Judicial officers often record factual circumstances. This service can be described as judicial photographs. For instance, damage to a motor vehicle or any other property can be recorded. Transfer and service of documents is another legal service offered by judicial officers. Debtors or persons fleeing from justice often avoid the service of documents. However, with the assistance of a judicial officer, some 95% of documents are successfully served. Judicial officers also perform pre-trial debt recovery. For this purpose, documents justifying the debt must be provided. A judicial officer shall determine the location of the debtor and shall send him notifications urging to repay the debt in good faith. He shall also mediate in coordinating the creditors' and the debtors' interests. Judicial officers also ensure the protection of the attached property, either movable or immovable. Legal advice is yet another service offered by judicial officers. Judicial officers help draw up various documents and contracts, as well as assess consequences of the performance of signed contracts. A judicial officer can also provide bankruptcy administration services for both natural persons and legal entities. Over the 15 years of private practice, legal officers become highly competent professionals and enjoy high credibility in courts. Presently, Lithuanian judicial officers independently witness and attest statements of sale of assets by auction, perform pre-trial investigation of complaints regarding proceedings, and replace a party to a recovery procedure. All these functions used to be performed by courts, and, therefore, procedures used to take longer. The Lithuanian population welcomes the activities of judicial officers. Over 70% claim that they trust judicial officers. As a result of efficient debt recovery, Lithuania is ranked 4th in Doing Business rankings of the World Bank and is higher than such advanced countries as Austria and Norway. However, efficient performance is no longer sufficient for a modern judicial officer. Concepts of peaceful, flexible, and cooperative enforcement provided by the Global Code of Enforcement obligate a judicial officer to be an assistant to both parties to the procedure. The objective of Lithuanian judicial officers is to become debt doctors in future, so that their work is respected and appreciated in the same way as the doctor's work is when performing necessary procedures, helping the patient get well.